Hello Midnights. Up next, Milwaukee's last hope, a dying city's desperate stand against evolving undead. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. War, John 5:28-29, do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who were in their graves will hear his voice and come out, those who have done good to live, and those who have done evil to be condemned. The city of Milwaukee had a heartbeat once, a frantic, joyous rhythm of sirens, laughter, and the endless hum of traffic. Now, it was silent, save for the dragging shuffle of the dead. Rain lashed down, a relentless, cold downpour that mirrored the despair in my gut. I hugged the rusted shotgun closer, its cold metal a small comfort against the chill seeping into my bones. The stock was cracked, held together with electrical tape, a testament to the countless times it had been used, dropped, or clutched in a desperate moment. The faint smell of gunpowder and rust clung to it, a grim perfume in a dying world. My name's Elise. I used to be a baker, smelling of flour and cinnamon. I could still almost taste the sweet warmth of a fresh baked apple turnover, the sticky sweetness on my tongue, a ghost of a memory that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. That memory felt like a dream from another life, a ghost haunting my waking hours, flickering just out of reach. Now, I smell of fear and stale blood, a metallic tang that never quite left my clothes or my skin, a constant reminder of the brutal, desperate fight for survival. It's been 2 years since the awakening, as the last, dying news anchors called it before the broadcasts flickered into static, replaced by the ceaseless, buzzing white noise of a dead world. But I remember the start of it all, clearer than I remember yesterday. It began subtly, an insidious whisper that grew into a roar. News reports spoke of a virulent new strain of flu, originating somewhere overseas, specifically pinpointed by a few obscure scientific journals as a novel respiratory illness emerging from Southeast Asian agricultural regions. Initial reports downplayed its severity, attributing severe symptoms to pre-existing conditions. Governments issued perfunctory travel advisories, but there was no real alarm. Life went on, oblivious to the encroaching doom. The global stock markets barely registered a blip. Medical professionals, focused on the annual influenza season, largely dismissed it as another, albeit aggressive, viral mutation. The first local cases began to appear in major global transportation hubs, New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, hushed and confined, or so we were told. Panic was unwarranted. Doctors attributed the strange, aggressive symptoms to extreme fevers, neurological complications from the viral infection, or even rare autoimmune responses. Public health officials emphasized calm, repeating assurances that containment protocols were effective. I remember standing in my bakery, flour on my apron, listening to the radio. The talk shifted from flu symptoms to something else, unexplained aggression, reports of people lashing out, biting. These isolated incidents were quickly labeled as mass hysteria or delusional paranoia by media pundits. Experts on TV shows debated the psychological impact of global pandemics, never truly grasping the biological horror unfolding. Their calm voice is a stark contrast to the growing unease in my gut. Rumors, dismissed as conspiracy theories, of a rapidly deteriorating mental state, of victims trying to eat others, started to spread on fringe online forums, drowned out by official reassurances. Then came the day the world cracked open. It wasn't a gradual decline, it was a sudden, violent rupture. I was kneading a batch of sourdough, the familiar rhythm of comfort, when the first screams echoed down the street. Not screams of pain, but something primal, guttural, a sound of pure, unadulterated savagery that scraped against my soul. Through the bakery window, I saw it, a man, his eyes wild and bloodshot, veins bulging in his neck, tearing into a woman's arm with a grotesque relish. Her cries were cut short, a sickening gurgle as life drained from her. He turned, his movements jerky, unnatural, a marionette with severed strings, and lunged at a bystander, a young man who'd just been laughing. There was no reasoning, no humanity left in his eyes. Just a ravenous hunger, an insatiable need to consume. The sirens began almost immediately, a chaotic symphony of fear that drowned out individual cries. Police cars, then ambulances, then military vehicles, their tires screeching on the asphalt, quickly became entangled in the growing madness. The initial response was confusion, then overwhelming force, but it was futile. It was like trying to stop a wildfire with a teacup. For every one they shot down, 3 more seemed to rise, driven by that same insatiable urge. The infection spread like a blight, a single bite, a single scratch, and you were one of them. Hospitals became overwhelmed almost instantly, their emergency rooms turning into gruesome charnel houses. Staff, exhausted and terrified, quickly became victims themselves. Those facilities that tried to quarantine the infected quickly fell silent, their lights winking out one by one. The news channels, once reporting, became testimonials, anchors pale and trembling, their voices cracking with unshed tears, until they too went dark. The last image I saw, before my own TV flickered into static, was a blurry shot of the city's downtown, smoke rising from countless fires, and the unmistakable, shuffling tide of the infected filling the streets, an unstoppable ocean of the dead. Communications infrastructure began to degrade rapidly, overloaded by frantic calls and then sabotaged or destroyed by the widespread panic. My bakery, once a haven of warmth and sweet smells, became a fortress, my heart a constant drum of dread. I barricaded the doors with whatever I could find, listening to the sounds of chaos outside, the screams and the gunfire, and then the chilling silence that followed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I learned to be quiet, to move like a ghost, to blend with the shadows. I learned to shoot, the recoil jarring my shoulder but the necessity absolute. I learned to scavenge, every empty shelf a testament to the world's rapid demise. I learned to kill, and each time, a piece of my old self chipped away. The cinnamon and flour were replaced by the scent of decay and the metallic tang of blood, a constant reminder of what I had become. Governments collapsed, their authority meaningless against the tide of the undead. Coordinated international efforts failed due to the speed and virulence of the outbreak. Supply chains fractured, leading to widespread famine and unrest even in uninfected areas. Communication networks failed, plunging the world into isolated pockets of terror. The military, once the bulwark of society, was decimated by overwhelming numbers and the insidious nature of the infection. Organized lines dissolved into desperate skirmishes, leading to widespread desertion as soldiers abandoned their posts to protect their own families, or became infected themselves. Cities became death traps, their populations either consumed or driven out into the desolate countryside, becoming refugees in their own ruined land. Food and water became scarce, every morsel a victory, every drop a treasure. The lucky few found ways to secure themselves, to scavenge. The unlucky became fodder for the ceaseless hunger. The very concept of nation withered and died, replaced by the brutal law of survival. Global positioning systems, GPS, began to fail erratically, satellites either decaying without maintenance or being intentionally shut down by desperate, failing governments to prevent the enemy from using them. The world went quiet. The sounds of human life, commerce, conversation, music, the laughter of children, were replaced by the mournful wind whistling through abandoned buildings and the ceaseless, groaning chorus of the infected. Survivors became ghosts, moving through the ruins, desperate for resources, constantly aware of the ever-present threat. Communities, small and fragile, formed and dissolved, often violently, as resources dwindled and paranoia reigned. Hope became a luxury few could afford, a dangerous ember that could lure you into a fatal mistake. Nature began to reclaim what humanity had lost, vines creeping up skyscrapers, weeds pushing through cracked pavement, turning concrete jungles into overgrown tombs. The seasons continued their relentless cycle, but without human intervention. Once manicured farmlands returned to wild fields, and once pristine water sources became stagnant and overgrown, harboring new, deadly diseases. 2 years have passed since the outbreak. The initial shock has faded, replaced by a grim acceptance. Survival is the only goal. Every sunrise is a reminder that I had survived another night, a grim victory, and every sunset a grim promise of the horrors to come, of the endless dark. The world is a graveyard, and we, the living, are merely trespassers, clinging to the crumbling edges of existence. The cinnamon and flour were replaced by the scent of decay and the metallic tang of blood, a smell I now barely registered. The infected themselves began to show disturbing new behaviors, a chilling evolution that hinted at a collective, predatory intelligence. The world wasn't merely broken, it was fundamentally rewritten. Cities, once vibrant hubs of humanity, became mausoleums. Skyscrapers stood like skeletal fingers pointing at a perpetually gray sky, their glass eyes shattered, reflecting nothing but desolation. Roads, once arteries of commerce, were choked with abandoned vehicles, rusting hulks adorned with moss and grime, silent testaments to desperate, futile escapes. Nature, unburdened by human intervention, began its relentless reclamation. Vines snaked up brickwork, grass pushed through cracked asphalt, and even small trees sprouted from forgotten rooftops. The air, once thick with exhaust and industry, was now cleaner, but carried the perpetual scent of decay and damp earth. Every street, every building, held the silent promise of a hidden threat, a lurking horror just around the corner. The technological web that interconnected the world unraveled. Electricity grids failed, plunging vast regions into perpetual darkness. Communication networks went silent, no more internet, no more phones, no more broadcasting. Water treatment plants ceased operations, leaving stagnant, contaminated pools where clean water once flowed. The intricate supply chains that fed and clothed billions vanished, turning every grocery store into a picked-over tomb. Modern conveniences, once necessities, became distant, impossible luxuries. Survival meant a return to raw, primal ingenuity, finding clean water, scavenging for meager food, building crude shelters, and maintaining constant vigilance. With governments dissolved, the concept of law and order became a forgotten relic. The thin veneer of civilization peeled away, revealing humanity's baser instincts. Trust became a dangerous gamble, compassion a fatal weakness. Small, desperate groups formed, often quickly succumbing to internal conflict, starvation, or the relentless pressure of the infected. Raiding, theft, and brutal violence were common, not just from the infected, but from other survivors. Morality became subjective, dictated by the immediate need for survival. There were no police, no courts, no safe havens beyond what you could carve out with your own two hands and protect with your last bullet. Beyond the physical devastation, the mental landscape of humanity was scarred beyond recognition. The constant, gnawing fear was a shared companion. Sleep was a luxury, often broken by nightmares or the distant groans of the dead. Grief was a heavy cloak, worn by all, for lost loved ones, lost homes, lost futures. Paranoia became a survival instinct. Every shadow held a threat, every distant sound a potential horde. Hope itself was a double-edged sword, a fleeting warmth that could motivate, but also a cruel illusion that could lead to reckless decisions and bitter disappointment. The world was not just devoid of people, it was devoid of innocence, of peace, of any predictable future. I was holed up in what used to be a public library on the outskirts of Milwaukee, the irony not lost on me. Surrounded by the quiet wisdom of a world that no longer existed, by shelves groaning under the weight of stories no one would ever read again, their pages yellowed and brittle, their covers often torn, I watched the street through a crack in the boarded-up window. The wood was splintered and gray, stained with what I hoped was just grime, but always suspected was something much darker, a permanent stain of despair. A horde, maybe 50 strong, lumbered past, their wet groans the only sound in the sodden afternoon, punctuated by the slurping sound of their bare, decaying feet on the slick asphalt. Each one was a grotesque parody of life, skin sloughing off in wet chunks, revealing muscle and bone, eyes milky and unfocused, mouths agape in a silent, unending scream. One of them, a woman in a tattered green dress that had once been vibrant, now faded and mud-stained, had half her face missing, revealing the pulpy darkness beneath, a sight that still made my stomach churn despite everything I'd seen. I sometimes wondered if they felt anything, if there was a flicker of the person they once were trapped inside. A sudden, sharp crash from downstairs sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me, so potent it made my teeth ache. I gripped the shotgun, my knuckles white, hard hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to escape its cage. Had they finally found a way in? A cold dread settled in my stomach, coiling tighter with every beat of my heart. I crept to the top of the creaking wooden stairs, each step a carefully placed prayer against giving away my position, my breath held tight in my chest, every muscle screaming with tension. The air down here was colder, heavier, thick with the scent of damp paper and decay, a tomb-like stillness that pressed in on me. I peered down into the gloomy main hall. A bookshelf lay toppled, scattering dusty tomes across the worn carpet, their pages like fallen leaves. My breath hitched, a sharp, choked gasp, a sound that felt too loud in the oppressive silence. It wasn't them. It was a rat. A huge, audacious rat, its beady eyes reflecting the dim light from the overcast sky, gnawing on a discarded wrapper that looked suspiciously like the last energy bar I'd been saving, my carefully rationed treasure. It stared at me for a moment, unafraid, before scurrying off into the shadows, a fleeting moment of ordinary life in an extraordinary hell that almost made me laugh with the sheer absurdity of it all. Relief, sharp and sudden, almost buckled my knees. I slid down the wall, exhaling a shaky breath that fogged in the cool air, misting before my eyes. This was my life now. Terror and relief in equal, agonizing measure. The constant tight knot in my stomach, the jumpiness, the way every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every distant sound a new horror. But then, a new sound cut through the quiet, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It wasn't a groan. It wasn't a shuffle. It was precise, methodical, like a small hammer against stone, or perhaps metal, and it was coming from deeper inside the library, from the back stacks, where the shelves stretched endlessly into the shadows, a maze of forgotten knowledge, waiting to be explored. My blood ran cold, then hot with a strange mix of fear and curiosity, a dangerous cocktail. My mind raced. Could it be another survivor? Hope, a dangerous, fragile thing, flickered within me, a tiny ember in the vast darkness of my existence, daring to ignite, despite the years of disappointment. Or was it something else? Something new? In this world, the unknown was almost always worse than the familiar horror of the shambling dead. I rose, shotgun raised, the familiar way to comfort, and began to move. Each step was a silent prayer, a whisper of caution, as I ventured deeper into the heart of the dead world, drawn by that persistent, enigmatic tapping. The air in the library hung heavy, thick with the scent of decaying paper and the metallic tang of fear. Dr. Victoria Billings' desperate plea about the infected's evolving intelligence, their chilling coordination, echoed in my mind, a relentless drumbeat against the fragile walls of my sanity. Cordyceps. The word was a venomous whisper, a biological curse that had twisted humanity into something unspeakable. I remembered the electronics store, the chilling sound of that precise, almost mechanical chittering, the way the infected had moved with a disturbing, predatory cunning. It wasn't just a physical threat anymore, it was a battle of minds, and we were losing. I moved deeper into the library, the rhythmic tapping growing louder, echoing through the shadow dials like a morbid metronome. It wasn't the clumsy footfalls of an infected, nor the skittering of rats. This was deliberate, precise. I rounded a corner, shotgun held ready, my finger hovering near the trigger, my breath barely a whisper, a cold dread clinging to me like a shroud. The air here was even colder, prickling my skin, heavy with the scent of dust and something vaguely metallic. Before me, illuminated by the focused beam of a small, powerful headlamp, was a figure. Not an infected, but a person, hunched over a workbench cobbled together from overturned shelves, their back to me. A shiver of something akin to terror, then a fragile, dangerous hope, ran down my spine. I hadn't seen another living soul in months, not since I'd fled the fleeting, violent embrace of a supposed survivor camp that ended in betrayal and bloodshed. The suddenness of this encounter, the sheer impossibility of it, locked my feet to the ground. The figure, oblivious, continued their work, a faint click of metal against metal, a sound that seemed to reverberate in the unnatural silence. It was a woman, her lab coat, stained and torn, hinted at a past life, a ghost of a profession. This had to be Dr. Victoria Billings, though the exhaustion carving lines into her face, even from this distance, made her almost unrecognizable from the pre-awakening broadcasts I sometimes remembered, broadcasts that now felt like ancient history. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. Dr. Billings slowly turned, her headlamp swinging to illuminate me in a sudden, blinding flash. I flinched, raising my shotgun reflexively, the action jerky, the weapon's weight suddenly foreign in my trembling hands. For a long, agonizing moment, neither of us spoke, caught in the stark, primal fear of an unexpected confrontation. Dr. Billings's eyes, despite the weariness, were sharp, intelligent, scrutinizing me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch, like a probe into my very soul. I saw the raw intelligence, the desperate drive, but also a flicker of something I hadn't seen in so long, recognition, and perhaps, a fragile hope that was almost more terrifying than despair. Dr. Billings's gaze flickered to my shotgun, then, almost imperceptibly, to the small, carefully placed charges of C4 I'd noticed on the ground around the workbench, clearly meant to collapse the shelf network if trouble arose, a final, desperate measure to prevent something from getting at whatever secret Dr. Billings was guarding. "You're alive." Dr. Billings's voice was hoarse, raspy, as if unused to forming full words, a dry whisper in the tomb-like air. It was a statement, not a question, laced with an almost disbelieving wonder that mirrored my own shock. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was low, careful, but the tension in the air remained thick enough to cut with a knife. "I heard the noise," I replied, my voice shaky but firm, forcing the words out past the knot in my throat. I lowered the shotgun fractionally, a minuscule act of trust, or perhaps, a desperate plea for peace. "What are you doing? Tearing apart a radio in a place like this?" Dr. Billings gestured to the dismantled radio, then to a chaotic array of wires, circuit boards, and ancient schematics spread across the makeshift table. A half-eaten, moldy piece of bread lay beside a complex diagram, a grim still life of survival. "I'm trying to rebuild a receiver capable of picking up very specific frequencies," she explained, her voice gaining a desperate urgency as she spoke about her work, a fervor that seemed to ignite a spark in the overwhelming darkness. There have been rumors, faint whispers on the airwaves, of sanctuaries, fortified cities, underground bunkers, places where remnants of governments or militaries might still cling to power. They're often garbled, distorted by the atmospheric interference that followed the collapse of the global grid, but some come from as far as the British Isles, even a few from what sounds like Scandinavian broadcasts. I'm specifically looking for a way to amplify the low-band frequencies, those that can pierce through the worst of the EM interference. For that, I need old vacuum tubes, high-frequency transistors, and some rare earth magnets from pre-war speakers. Every piece of working equipment is a godsend. Her gaze hardened, a grim determination replacing the initial surprise, a chilling resolve. And time is running out. This awakening virus. It's not just a flu. It's a fungal infection, a mutated Cordyceps strain that doesn't just parasitize, it rewires. It infiltrates the brain, creating new neural pathways, overriding the host's consciousness while preserving motor functions. The initial symptoms are rapid, a fever spike, then the aggression. But in the long-term infected, the ones who've been active for months or even years, it's evolving. They're becoming faster, more aware. I've observed patterns. Their movements, their reactions. They're learning. Yesterday, I saw a small group of them deliberately setting a distraction near a fortified position I was observing, drawing out its defenders. And sometimes, her voice dropped to a chilling whisper, sometimes, in the absolute quiet, I hear them. Not just groans, but something else. A faint, almost imperceptible chittering. It's a high-pitched, resonant click, like chitin rubbing together, often followed by distinct low-frequency hums. I believe it's a form of echolocation, but also a primitive form of communication, a way to coordinate, planning. And if they are truly coordinating, if they are developing a collective intelligence, then humanity's time is not just running out. It's already over. They'll hunt us down with the precision of a pack, not the mindless surge of a horde. Imagine a predator that doesn't just react, but anticipates. That remembers your hiding places. That learns from its mistakes. That's what we're facing. She looked at me, a desperate plea in her eyes, raw and exposed, her own humanity hanging by a thread. I need parts. Specific components. Old electronics, communication devices. Anything that can transmit or receive. Have you seen anything like that out there? The question hung in the air, a fragile bridge between two solitary lives, laden with the weight of humanity's last hope, a plea against the growing, intelligent darkness that now lurks just beyond the library's crumbling walls. Anything like that out there? I repeated, the words feeling foreign on my tongue, my voice barely a croak. I swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear coating my mouth. The cold rain lashed harder against the boarded windows, a dull drumbeat accompanying the sinister chittering that now seemed to echo from the deepest corners of my memory. I thought of the pre-war electronics store, the one where I'd heard the chittering. It was a risk. A massive, terrifying risk. But the thought of an evolving, calculating horde was a far greater horror than any immediate danger. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of damp dust and old paper filling my lungs, a grim reminder of the quiet, decaying world outside. There's an electronics superstore on the other side of Grevenbrock, I finally managed, my voice gaining a surprising strength as the words formed. Saturn. Or what used to be Saturn. It was hit pretty hard, but I saw some server racks, old communication gear. Even some high-end audio equipment. If anyone had vacuum tubes or decent magnets, it would be a place like that. I heard them there, a few months back. That chittering sound. I didn't understand it then. I just thought it was the building settling. But they were moving with purpose. Almost like they were coordinating a breach. They worked together to bring down a reinforced security door. Not a mindless smash, but leveraging its weak points. It was chilling. Dr. Billings' eyes flared with an almost manic excitement, a stark contrast to her earlier weariness. Saturn? That's a gold mine, but also a death trap. The sheer volume of discarded consumer electronics might yield what I need. The server components alone could provide invaluable resources, not just for the receiver, but to potentially power a more robust signal, perhaps even a short-range data burst. But if they're exhibiting coordinated behavior there, if they've learned to breach reinforced structures, it means it's a high-risk zone. They might have established it as a hunting ground, or even a rudimentary staging area. A hive, perhaps, where their collective intelligence is growing faster than we can comprehend. They could even be luring other survivors there, using the very things we need as bait. She looked from my shotgun to the C4 charges, a silent calculation passing through her mind. Are you willing to go back there? With me? We'd have to plan meticulously. Get in, get what we need, get out. Any longer than a few hours, and we risk being caught in their new, terrifying tactics. The question hung heavy in the air, a terrifying proposition. Go back to a place of recent, unnerving memory? A place where the infected were not just shambling threats, but possibly strategic, intelligent hunters? The idea was madness. But then, so was sitting in a library, waiting for the inevitable. The silence stretched, broken only by the incessant rain and the distant, almost imagined, faint chittering. The thought of them, planning, learning, and using their macabre intelligence against humanity, was a horror that burrowed deeper than any bite. It was a cold, calculated extinction. My hand still trembled on the shotgun, but something else stirred within me, a defiant spark against the overwhelming darkness. If there was even a fractional chance, a single sliver of hope, it was worth facing the new nightmare. What was left to lose? My old life was gone, my bakery a phantom scent. Only survival remained, and now, a desperate, terrifying purpose. Yes, I heard myself say, the word, a stark pronouncement in the oppressive quiet. It felt strange, foreign on my tongue, but also undeniably right. A surge of cold resolve replaced the fear. Yes, I'll go with you. But we go prepared. And we don't go in blind. Tell me what kind of resistance we can expect. What do these tactics of theirs look like? My gaze met Dr. Billings's, a silent pact forged in the heart of the dying world. Dr. Billings nodded, her expression grim but a spark of desperate hope now flickering in her bloodshot eyes. Good. We need to understand the enemy to fight them. This isn't just about escaping anymore, Elise. This is about survival through knowledge. She gestured to a crude map laid out on her makeshift workbench, a tattered, rain-stained map of Grevenbrock, marked with cryptic symbols and hurried notes. The Awaken, as I've started calling the long-term infected, are no longer the mindless shamblers we first encountered. Their fungal infestation has progressed, forming a complex neural network within their brains, overriding their humanity but enhancing their primal instincts to a terrifying degree. Think of it like a twisted, grotesque superorganism, where each infected is a node in a vast, interconnected network. She tapped a marked area on the map, a cluster of warehouses near the old industrial park. I observed them here, 2 weeks ago. A group of about 30 awakened. Instead of mindlessly converging on a sound, they flanked a small group of scavengers. 3 of them created a cacophony, loud groans, breaking glass, drawing the scavengers' attention, while the main group moved silently, using shadows and ruined buildings for cover. When the scavengers were focused on the distraction, the main group attacked from the sides, cutting off their escape routes. It was brutally efficient. And the chittering? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the memory of that sound making my skin crawl. The chittering, she confirmed, her voice low and grave, is their primary form of communication. It's a complex system of high-frequency clicks and low-frequency pulses, almost like a biological sonar. The clicks allow them to see their environment, detecting movement and obstacles even in complete darkness. The pulses, those deep, resonant hums you might have heard, are how they communicate over distance, coordinating movements, sharing information about prey, that's us, and potential threats. I believe it's similar to how some bat colonies or insect swarms operate, but on a macro scale, terrifyingly precise. It's not language as we know it, but a series of commands, warnings, and positional data shared directly through their interconnected neural network. There are, in essence, thinking together, reacting as one organism. She traced a line on the map towards the Saturn store. If they've established a presence at Saturn, especially one where they coordinated a breach, it suggests a significant level of fungal maturation within that localized cluster. They might have a primary node, a particularly old or strong infected that acts as a central hub for the fungal network, amplifying their collective intelligence and range of coordination. Such a node would be deeply embedded, likely in a dark, damp, and undisturbed area, perhaps the store's basement, or a server room. Destroying it could temporarily cripple their coordination in the area, but it would also draw the entire remaining population down on us like a swarm of angry wasps. Beyond coordination, Dr. Billings continued, her voice gaining a chilling academic detachment despite the horror of her words, they are also developing heightened senses. Their sight is poor, especially in bright light, but their hearing is incredibly acute, picking up the slightest rustle of clothing, the softest breath. And their sense of smell. It's evolving. They can track us by our scent, distinguishing living human flesh from anything else, even through heavy rain. We'll need to move silently, in the deepest shadows, and consider covering our scent, perhaps with something noxious or overwhelming like decay. I've been experimenting with using concentrated ammonia, but it's limited. The smell of our fear, our sweat, is a beacon to them now, a delicious promise of fresh meat. She paused, looking at me, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes. This isn't a simple smash and grab, Elise. This is entering the mind of the hive. Every creak of the floorboards, every whispered breath, could be a broadcast to 100 awakened, telling them exactly where we are. They won't just react, they'll anticipate our movements, set ambushes. They are us, but without our empathy, without our self-preservation beyond the will of the fungus. They are the ultimate predator, learning and adapting to every tactic we throw at them. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, replaced by an eerie, dripping silence. But the silence in the library was no longer peaceful. It was filled with the phantom clicks and hums of a monstrous, evolving intelligence, waiting. "So, what's our plan?" I asked, my voice steady now, the fear a cold, sharp edge that honed my resolve rather than dulling it. How do we fight something that thinks like that? The question was less about if we could, and more about how we would even begin. The vast, ruined city outside felt less like a wilderness and more like a carefully constructed hunting ground. Dr. Billings leaned over the map, her finger tracing a precarious route across the city. "First, we need to move at night. Their poor eyesight in the dark is our biggest advantage. But that means navigating by touch and sound, and their echolocation will be even more potent. We need to find a way to minimize our own acoustic footprint." She paused, her eyes scanning the dim library shelves, her mind already racing. Rubber soles, perhaps. Or even wrapping our boots in rags. Anything to dampen the sound of our steps on broken glass or rubble. Next, scent. The ammonia I mentioned is too volatile, too noticeable. We need something that masks, not just covers. Something organic, something dead. Rotting flesh, perhaps. We could try creating a poultice of local vegetation mixed with decayed animal matter. It would be foul, but it might just be enough to throw them off our trail for a short while. A shiver ran down my spine at the thought, but survival now demanded such grotesque measures. Then, the approach to Saturn. It's a large building, multiple entry points. We'll need to observe it for at least 24 hours to identify patrol patterns, potential primary node locations, and any visible signs of their coordination. Look for disturbed rubble, choke points where they seem to funnel other infected, even crude barricades they might have erected to herd prey. She tapped the map, her finger hovering over a narrow alleyway. This alley behind the store. It's overgrown. Might offer a concealed approach, if we can clear a path without alerting anything. Once inside, the objective is speed. If we locate the electronics, focusing on high-gain antennae, any kind of vacuum tube, and especially large, powerful magnets from audio systems or server hard drives. These older components are often more robust, less reliant on delicate modern microcircuitry that would have failed during the grid collapse. "And the primary node?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "If we find it?" Dr. Billings's jaw tightened. "We avoid it if possible. Our mission is retrieval, not eradication. Attempting to destroy a primary node without overwhelming force would be suicide. But if we are cornered, if it's our only option, the C4 might be our only way out. A controlled demolition, collapsing a section of the building to bury the node and buy us time to escape. It's a last resort, but a necessary one." She looked at the improvised charges on her table, the grim reality of our situation sinking deeper. "This is a desperate gamble, Elise," she said, her voice raw with conviction. "But if there's any chance of reaching those sanctuaries, of finding a cure, of rebuilding, it starts with that signal. It starts with facing this new, terrifying evolution head-on. Are you with me?" I looked at the shotgun in my hands, then at the tattered map of a dead city that might hold the key to a future. The air still hummed with the phantom chittering, but now, a different sound joined it, the faint, desperate beat of my own heart, no longer just surviving, but daring to hope. "I'm with you, Doctor," I replied, the words firm. "Let's plan this out. Every detail. Every shadow. Every breath." The walk to the edge of Grevenbrock was a gauntlet of ghosts. Every abandoned car, every shattered shop window, held a silent story of terror. As dusk bled into a bruised twilight, the true horror of the city began to reveal itself. The distant groans of the awakened grew louder, a mournful, unending chorus that permeated the very air. We moved through a residential street, keeping to the overgrown gardens, using the dense, neglected shrubs as cover. The smell of damp earth mixed with something else, something cloying and sickly sweet, the scent of decay that hung heavy over everything. We passed a child's playground, the rusted swings swaying gently in the unseen wind, creaking a lonely, tuneless melody. A single, small, muddy shoe lay discarded in the sandbox, a stark, gut-wrenching reminder of the innocent lives swallowed by this nightmare. It was harder to move through these places, the ghosts of normalcy more haunting than any ghoulish monster. Then, the horror deepened. We passed a small, detached house, its front door hanging open like a broken jaw. A faint, flickering light pulsed from within, not fire, but something biological. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, Dr. Billings motioned for us to approach cautiously. We peered through a shattered window. Inside, illuminated by a sickly green luminescence emanating from its own twisted flesh, was an awakened. But this was different. It was hunched over what looked like a television set, its back to us. The screen was cracked, dark. But what gripped my attention was not the creature, but what it was doing. Its fungal growths, a grotesque network of orange and black filaments, had extended from its head and arms, not just around, but into the broken electronics. It wasn't trying to eat it. It was trying to connect to it. More disturbing still, from its back, a new appendage had sprouted, a thick, segmented stalk, pulsating with that same sickly green light, extending towards a rusted metal antenna poking out from the roof. It wasn't just infected, it was becoming a grotesque organic radio tower, a living beacon. "Hello," rhythmic hum, deeper than any groan, resonated from its chest, a sound that made the very air vibrate. Dr. Billings's breath hitched beside me, a soft, strangled sound. It's broadcasting," she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of terror and a horrifying scientific awe. "It's a localized relay. A new stage of development. The fungus is trying to expand its network, its communication range. It's not just receiving, it's actively trying to transmit its collective consciousness, to assimilate everything. This changes everything. They are evolving faster than I feared." The hum intensified, and the chittering began, not just from the creature within, but from somewhere close by, a frantic, answering chorus. It was like the world itself was whispering, clicking, and humming around us. The air grew cold, a preternatural chill. The awakened in the house suddenly stiffened, its head snapping up, not turning towards us, but listening. Its eyeless gaze seemed to bore through the wall, through the very night, directly at us. It hadn't seen us, but it knew. "Run," Dr. Billings breathed, her voice a sharp, urgent command. Now. We didn't need to be told twice. We turned and fled, the chittering growing into a frenzied symphony behind us, the low hum vibrating in our bones. We could feel their eyes on us, not seeing, but perceiving, a monstrous, collective intelligence awakened to our presence. The night, once our shield, now felt like a vast, open expanse, every shadow a potential hiding place, every sound a deadly betrayal. Our race for survival had just gained a terrifying new dimension. The terror wasn't just the sight of them, or the sound. It was the constant, gnawing knowledge that the world had fundamentally shifted, that the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. It was the small, insidious ways the horror permeated every moment of existence, a fear that seeped into the marrow of our bones, corrupting even our quietest thoughts. It began with the absence of safe spaces. Homes, once sanctuaries, became potential tombs, their familiar walls offering no true solace. Every creaking floorboard, every rustle of leaves outside, could signify a breach, an imminent intrusion by the insatiable tide. The concept of home now meant little more than a temporary, often fragile, barricade against a relentless, unthinking enemy. Sleeping was a dangerous gamble, a brief surrender to vulnerability, often punctuated by nightmares that blurred the lines between waking horror and subconscious dread. Even in the deepest sleep, the mind remained hyper-alert, jumpy, ready to snap awake at the slightest disruption, the lingering echoes of screams and groans a constant lullaby of the damned. Rest was a fleeting illusion, true peace, a forgotten dream. Then there was the constant, agonizing hunger and thirst, a primal ache that overshadowed all other sensations. Food was no longer a comfort or a choice, but a desperate, unending hunt. We scavenged through abandoned stores, their shelves picked clean by previous survivors or rotting with unusable produce, a macabre still life of forgotten abundance. Every rationed bite was a hard-won victory, every drop of collected rainwater a precious treasure. The threat of starvation was almost as potent as the infected themselves, slowly eroding our strength, blurring our vision, making every decision a struggle. Sometimes, the hunger was so bad, the gnawing ache in my stomach so intense, That the scent of decaying meat from a distant infected almost triggered a primal, terrifying response, a fleeting moment of pure animalistic craving that horrified me more than anything else. It was a stark reminder of how thin the veneer of humanity had become. The silent, ever-present threat of betrayal also haunted us, a more insidious fear than the shambling dead. Other survivors, once a beacon of hope, were often just another danger, their faces twisted by the same desperation that gnawed at our own souls. Scarcity bred savagery. I'd seen alliances shatter over a can of beans, trust dissolve at the glint of a knife, loyalties extinguished by the flicker of a lighter. The unspoken rule became, trust no one, rely only on yourself. This isolation, this enforced paranoia, was a slow poison, eroding the very thing that made us human, our capacity for connection, for empathy. The loneliness was a cold companion, always there, even when I was with Dr. Billings, a silent wall between us built of fear and the unspoken horrors we had witnessed alone, a profound and aching solitude in a world teeming with death. And the environment itself became hostile, a reflection of the world's broken state. The weather, once a mere inconvenience, was now a deadly adversary, its extremes amplified by our lack of shelter and resources. Freezing winters without heat meant the constant threat of hypothermia, leading to numb fingers and aching joints. Scorching summers without clean water brought the insidious creep of dehydration and sunstroke. Relentless rain soaked through threadbare clothes, inviting the chill of sickness and the slow, insidious decay of our few remaining possessions. The ruined infrastructure meant collapsed roads, unstable buildings that could give way at any moment, and the pervasive threat of unseen traps, broken glass, or plummeting debris. Every step was a calculation, every shadow a potential hiding place for something terrible, or a plunge into an unseen danger. The very ground beneath our feet was a minefield of forgotten dangers, of the dead and the broken. Most chillingly, it was the loss of hope, then its terrifying return. For months, hope was a dangerous illusion, a weakness. Accepting the end, the new normal of endless struggle, was easier, safer, a form of self-preservation. But now, with Dr. Billings' desperate quest, with the faint whisper of sanctuaries carried on fractured airwaves, a fragile, dangerous ember had been rekindled. It was a terrifying feeling, this resurgence of hope, because it meant there was something left to lose. It meant a new layer of vulnerability, a new kind of despair if this last, desperate gamble failed. The world was a living nightmare, and this flicker of possibility, however faint, made the nightmare almost unbearable. It made the terror of failure sharper, more personal, threatening not just my physical life, but the fragile, buried remnants of my soul, the last vestiges of who I used to be.